I mean, I'm a bit of an outsider here because I'm not an Italian. But that has also advantages. So I'm looking from the outside, and I'm not wedded to certain parties. I have to say, make similar points, but I also do other points. So I have three general comments. One about the outcome, three about the outcome, four ideas for explanation, and very little about consequences. So my first outcome is continuity. It was said before by both of you, 2013, terremoto, a big change in the electoral outcome. And what I would underline is in 2013, we changed from a bipolar to a tripolar system. The rise of new challengers, Cinque Stelle, Scelta Civica was not mentioned, but Cinque Stelle was, of course, the most important one. It was fueled by the convergence of center-left, center-right in the grand coalition of Monti. It was saying that it was neither left nor right, different from Syriza Podemos Bloco de Izquierda. It was almost exclusively populist, so it had almost exclusively an anti-elitist message. And accordingly, the main structuring issue at the time in 2013 was not related to the economic crisis, but to the country-specific political crisis. And I would say Berlusconi became an issue in and of himself. That's what we in our work found for Italy as the structure of the political space in the 2013 election. You have the horizontal axis, which is economic, and you have all the parties in the middle of the economic axis distinguishing themselves with respect to democratic renewal. And Cinque Stelle is very close to democratic renewal, and the PDL at the time very far removed from it. So this was the key issue at the time. Now, tomorrow will be a conference at the Robert Schuman Center, and there is a paper by Gary Marx and Lisbeth Hoche, and they have this footnote where they show the results of expert survey with respect to Cinque Stelle. And you see the scale score from 0 to 10. Cinque Stelle gets 9.88 on the scale of populism, almost the maximum. And then they have also asked the experts how clear is the program of these parties with respect to economic left-right issues and with respect to Galtan issues. And you see the Cinque Stelle has very blurred positions both on economics and on cultural issues. So they are populist, anti-elitist, and not much more for the population. I come back to this. So we have in the 2017 elections a stabilization of the tripolar structure. Cinque Stelle is even stronger than in 2013, and as Mario said, I think the same. You have now people crystallizing party identities, which suggests that it will be a stable element of the Italian system for quite a while. The right, there was very little talk on the right so far, has been capable of forming a very large but highly incoherent electoral coalition. And on the right, the one who won was not the center-right. I mean, the PD was beaten, but the center-right was even beaten more than the PD. And I think that is a very important point. On the left entered into the elections divided. And you seem to say it's the fault of Renzi. I mean, maybe it was also the fault. Huge discussion. But it was strategically extremely disadvantageous that the right entered divided. Now, who are the winners and the losers? Here you see it. The winners are two. You have the new right, the Lega, and you have what I would say the new left, new center, Cinque Stelle. We come back to this. The losers are the center-right and the center-left, both of them. So the mainstream parties are the losers. Monti, he has been forgotten, but Scelta Civica did 10.6% in 2013, wiped out, doesn't exist anymore. These small groups which joined centro-sinistra and centro-destra doesn't exist. Now, I was very struck by this graph. What you see is green, what you see is blue and yellow. Blue is where the center-right predominates. Yellow is where Cinque Stelle predominates. Now, what I suggest is that in the north, you have the rise of the challenger from the new right, and the key issue, as has been said, is immigration. In the south, you have the rise of a challenger from the radical left to a certain extent, which is Cinque Stelle, and the key issue is economic uncertainty, as you said. Now, to make this plausible, I did something, I compared the outcome in Lombardy 3, it's one of these regions, I clicked on the region, Lombardy 3 is in the north, with the Swiss outcome 2015. And on the other hand, I compared the outcome in Sicily 2, it's also one of the two regions in Sicily, with the Greek election 2015. And here you see what happens. There is a surprising similarity between Lombardy and Switzerland. And there is a surprising similarity between Greece and Sicily if you consider Cinque Stelle in the north as something like the new left, and if you consider Cinque Stelle in the south as radical left like Syriza. So I compare in Sicily Cinque Stelle with Syriza, and I compare Cinque Stelle in the north with the Greens and the related parties in Switzerland. What you see is that in both comparisons, Cinque Stelle is bigger. So Cinque Stelle is enormously big if compared to comparable systems. On the other hand, Forza Italia, the centro-destra proper, is small in comparison to both countries. So the real loser here is the centro-destra. Now, explanations. My first explanation, institutional electoral system, we have a new system. I would say, in spite of this system, in terms of vote share, be sure, vote share, it's very similar. So the electoral system did not influence so much the outcome in terms of vote share. The economic crisis, it has been mentioned before. Mario, I think I share. The incumbents is the PD, economic voting, punishment of the incumbents. I got this from The Economist. I mean, in Italy, they talk about the government tried to sell crescita, crescita, crescita. Unfortunately, the growth is lower than the average in the Eurozone. And Italy, that you see here from the graphic from Financial Times, it's one among 4 countries in Europe which has not yet gone back to where it was before 2008 in the crisis. I mean, Greece is the catastrophe, but Italy is the second worst case in terms of economic stagnation. And here you see a very serious problem of Italy. Productivity growth, labor productivity growth is really lagging behind. So I think the people in the South especially were well aware that the economic situation was not as good as predicted. Then the second explanation is a political crisis. So the center-right really was hit by the wheelings and dealings of Berlusconi, and he was responsible for the destruction of the Monti government. He was responsible for the destruction of the Letta government. So in the end, finally, he was punished accordingly. And the center-left, I think, was punished for the referendum and the split in the PD, which was linked to the referendum. And finally, the refugee crisis. I mean, you saw every day on Italian news the rubber boats coming and the people dying in the Mediterranean. And I think The Lega, in particular, enormously benefited from this refugee crisis. So one final word, what are the consequences? It's a hung parliament, you know. The coalition options are many, but feasible are probably none. So it's just, I think it's up to discussion. I don't know how to solve this coalition question. The question revoting with a new electoral system, I think the similarity of the outcome in terms of vote shares with two very different electoral systems shows that this is probably not doing the trick with respect to vote shares. It might be doing the trick in terms of seats, but in terms of seats, the veil of ignorance has been lifted, and I think it would be probably highly unlikely to introduce a bonus kind of based system given the distribution of the votes as they are.